Alright, today I'm going to talk about reloading, and I want to start out with these commercial grade military 7.62 by 5.1 ammunition, and this is what I'm going to start with for my reloading. It's nice brass. This is about as cheap as I can find for NATO 308 rounds. Buying them for about 50 cents a round right now at Walmart. That's the brand, ZQ 7.62 by 5.1. So we're going to put a few through the rifle, and then later on we'll show how to process the brass and reload them into new rounds. Shooting through my Remington 700 SPS varmint in 308. It's got a little bit of work done to the stock. It's got a muzzle brake. I've got a Nikon Pro Staff BDC 3 to 9 by 50 scope on D&Z rings. Anyways, let's load it up. And I'm shooting at 200 yards right now. So now I've got my brass, and it just needs to be deprimed, swaged, and start loading it through the press. Alright, I'm going to go over the first steps here in processing military brass. We've gone and shot 10 rounds of the military grade or NATO 7.62 by 5.1 millimeter ZQ ammunition, which I have here. Here's the empty cases. First thing we need to do is decap the primers, and I'm using a Lee universal decapping die. This is really nice because it's a little bit more heavy duty than other ones, and these military brass the primers are crimped in so that they don't just pop out easily like other commercial grade 308 ammunition. So we need to press the primers out, and then that crimp that holds it in there, we need to swage that crimp out of there so we can press new primers in. So I'm going to go ahead and put the die in, and we'll get those primers popped out. For processing this, I use just a little Lee single stage. It's a cheap little press, but man, it works really good. And I've got my Lee number 2 shelf holder right here. It fits 308. I'll get this set up real quick. I've already got the die set up for doing this 308, so it's just a matter of sticking it in. And in the drawer, I've got a little bin, and it catches all my primers down here. There's a hole underneath the table, and the primers pop out and they go into that little bin, so I'm able to have a nice clean operation in that regard. So let's go ahead and decap this. Show you here, primer's been pushed out, but there is that swage there, that the crimp that we'll need to take out. Alright, well, there's our 10 rounds, it's been decapped. There, the next step we have to do is deal with getting rid of the crimps in these shells. And how we're going to do that, there's a few different ways you can do it. The way that I found works the best is using these dies made by CH4D. You can go on their website and they've got a bunch, and now this is specifically for getting rid of the crimp on military brass. And so you've got your main die, we'll stick that in, and then you've got a couple of the actual crimping heads, and for large rifle and small rifle, so whether you want to do 223 or 308, you know, it comes with the dies for both. So we want the large rifle tool, and it just pops into the bottom of the press here, like so. And then I've already got this set for the right depth for doing my 7.62 brass. Put that in. And then the 308 shell holder, the Lee No. 2 shell holder, it pops into the top right here, and a little retaining ring snaps over. Let me just adjust the camera a little bit so we can get all this. Alright, so it's very simple. All we do is put the brass in the top, pull down until you feel just a little bit of force, and that's all it takes just to press that swage out of there. And it's probably pretty tough to see. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to see it or not, but it just puts like it just presses that hole open and puts a little chamfer around the edge of the primer pocket, and makes it real nice to press new primers in there. That's all there is to that. Sometimes with brass that's been crimped a little bit harder than others, it'll actually knock a little ring of brass out of there, and when you're cleaning the primer pocket, you just want to pull that little ring of brass out of there. It's just like a thin hair of brass. So we'll run these 10 through here. It takes very little force. If you push too hard, you'll end up damaging the brass. Trying to push too hard on it. And this will be the only time that this brass will need this swaging done. Once this is done, it can be refired, you know, as many times as the brass is still good, and you won't ever have to do this step again. So there's the 10 rounds. Swage that crimp out of there, and that's all there is to that. Alright, the next step in our reloading is going to be to clean out these primer pockets. They've got a little bit of, you know, burnt carbon in there from the last time they were fired, and we just want to clean that up a little bit so that it's nice and cleaned out for the new primers that are going in there. I plan to get a Frankfurt Arsenal wet rotary tumbler in the near future. That seems to be one of the better ways to clean the brass, and that gets in the primer pocket, gets inside the cases, gets everything real clean. But right now I've just got this little Lee primer pocket tool, and it's got a large end and a small end for both pistol and rifle, large and small. And it works pretty good for just knocking out the debris that's inside that primer pocket there. So go ahead and we'll just give it a few twists like that, and it cleans it. I don't know how much you can see in there, but it cleans it out pretty good. So we'll clean out our 20 pieces. I'm going to be loading 20 rounds today. Just kind of making some target ammo with it. Got some good groups. Already figured out the load development on what works good in my rifle. When we're doing this, I talked earlier about the little ring of brass that sometimes gets left in the pocket. When you clean it with this tool, it'll knock that little sliver of brass out of the primer pocket. Make it nice and clean for the new primers. Alright, our 20 pieces of brass are ready to load. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is lube our cases so that they're lubricated to go through the press and we're not going to have anything getting jammed up. This Hornady one-shot case lube seems to work really, really well. It was recommended to me and I haven't had any issues with it. What I want to do is go another chance to get a good set of eyes on the brass and make sure that everything is looking the way it should, that we don't have any damaged brass. I'll shake up the case lube and just a couple shots there. I like to roll them like so, kind of get a couple shots on it. And then I'll just let it sit for a couple minutes, let it flow out. Alright, now I'm going to go over loading up the primer tube for the reloading press. And so we've got a box of 100 primers, large rifle primers, primer tray, and this is our primer loading tube. So what we want to do is open this up. And depending on the manufacturer of primers, sometimes these are all flipped around. These Winchester ones are kind of nice because they're all going the same direction. What we'll do is put this over, flip it. Now we've got them all going the right direction. Some of them, like I said, will be all mixed around like this. So these trays are designed that when you roll them around, the primers are heavy on one side and they'll flip over like that. So now we've got them all going the right way. Put the lid of the tray on, flip it over, and now we've got them all in the direction that we can load. Take a primer tube, and this one is for the large rifle primers. There's different size ends, whether you're doing small pistol, large pistol, small rifle. So what we do is just press down on it and then just start loading into the tube. Alright, now our primer tube, our loading tube, is full of primers. So now it's time to load them into the press. Alright, now that we've got our primer tube full, what we want to do is flip the alarm bar over and set this on here and pull out the pin, and all but one of the primers should have dropped all the way down into the press. Take the follower rod for the press and just knock that top one down. Just make sure that all of them fell through. Take that out, put our alarm bar back down, and the primer follower just sits in top, puts a little bit of pressure on the primers to make sure they feed good. And that's it for loading the primers. Alright, we're going to get started here. This is the Dillon RL550B progressive press. I love it. It works really, really well. It's pretty much set up right now for what I'm going to be doing. I've got Alliant Reloader 15 powder in here. The last time I used the press, I made the same rounds as I'm going to make today, so there isn't going to be much setup, but I will go through a few things and we will be checking everything. So the first thing we want to do, I've got all the brass that we've processed over here. It's ready to go. I'm going to put it through the press. The first stage is going to be resizing. If the brass had the spent primers in it still, this stage would also decap the brass, resize it. It's a full length sizing die, so it'll do a full length brass including the neck, and then on the forward stroke it will also prime with a new primer. So I'm going to put our first piece of brass in. We're going to pull the handle and it's going to resize that brass for us. And push forward, and now it's primed. So we're going to move to the second stage, and this is where the powder charge comes in. I'm just going to use it kind of single stage right now. I'm not going to put our next piece of brass in because I want to make sure that the powder measure is throwing the right powder charge for us before we start going through everything. So bring it up and come back down, and I'm looking for 43 grains of Reloader 15. It's been giving me real nice groups. It's on the lighter side. Take this little brass plug out. Let's check what our powder charge is. So we're 43.7. It's a little bit high. These loads aren't as particular because I'm going to be using them just for basically for planking. But we'll just check it again. There is some variation with this extruded powder. It's not the best metering. It's okay. 43.1. So we are right in the range, and I'm sure if we did a let's do one more and just confirm that we're where we want to be. .7. So that's right in the right range there. And you can see this brass has gotten a new primer in it. So we can put this back in. Put our pin in to keep the brass in there. Fumbling a little bit because I've got the camera in front of me. There we go. So we don't need the scale anymore. Turn it off. Out of the way. And at this point, we can start putting the brass through. Charge this one, and we're resizing and priming the next piece. Now, at this stage, we're going to be adding a bullet. So today we are using Hornady 155 grain hollow point boat tail. These are a real nice, accurate bullet, and it's been working really well for me. That's what we're going to be using, so we drop the bullet in there. And put another piece of brass in here. And I'm going for 2.800 inches overall case length. And it, like I said, it's already set up, so I'm just going to run it through it. And now I'm going to take this out and I'm going to confirm that our overall length is, in fact, 2.8. Let's see if I can sneak this in here. So we're 2.5 thou over, which is just fine. It's okay to be a little bit over. I could adjust it down and get it right bang on, but for this round, that'll be just fine. We'll be all right with that. So we'll stick that back in. And then the last step, advance. Now where this bullet is where we're going to crimp it. And I've got it set up for just a really light crimp, just enough so that the brass doesn't catch when you're cycling it in the rifle. It tends to be a little bit more accurate with a light or even no crimp at all. I like to have just a little tiny bit. And when we advance, we have one complete bullet now. Here it is. And it's probably really tough to see, but there is just a light crimp on there. And at this point, now that everything is set up and confirmed, it'll be pretty quick to start going through and making the bullets. So we'll get kind of readjusted on the camera and start cycling through and show you the full process without stopping at each station. Okay, we're gonna start going here. Now each time we advance, it's going to be a completed bullet. Every time I'm placing the bullet into the case, I'm checking that that powder charge is in there and making sure that it looks like the right charge, just in case anything happens. With these 308, a double charge would overflow the case, so that would be obvious if we've got a double charge. We're looking for light charges or over. My experience with this press so far is that it's going to be right in the area that we want it every time. That's it for cases. So now we're just running the last 3 through. And there we go. We got 20 completed cases. Rounds now. So the next step is going to be to clean them off and check all our dimensions, inspect them, make sure they're going to be safe to fire. Alright, here are 20 completed rounds, and I just use the same rag that we use to lube cases to wipe them off. There's a little bit of grime that gets on these from the brass cycling through the press, and that Hornady case lube seems to work really well to wipe everything off, especially if you've got cases that your brass isn't quite as clean. It cleans up pretty nice after. There's the first one, and I got this Lyman headspace gauge for 308 Winchester, and it's a really nice tool, and it will allow us to check the headspace, which is where our die presses the shoulder. When we drop this in here, we want it to be flush with the top of this gauge, or even just down a bit, and there is a cutout in the gauge which shows that's your minimum length, and then the top of the shoulder is the maximum length. And you can see our shell is right about at the top. It's just about perfect. It seems to work really well with my rifle. Now, another feature of this gauge is your brass length. And as you reload the brass, it will actually stretch or grow as you resize the brass. And so once you've reloaded the brass a couple of times, you'll have to trim the brass to length. All my brass, I checked it, it's within limit, and you can see here it's the same kind of concept. As long as it's not above the top of the gauge or below the bottom cutout in the gauge, you can see it's right kind of in between the top and bottom, so it's pretty well perfect for our brass length. So we're looking really good with these rounds, and we'll just give it a little bit of an inspection, make sure that the primer is seated properly, make sure that everything looks good. We can check our overall length again, just to make sure that we're where we want to be. Yeah, we're still right in that area, 2.803, which is perfect for these. I'm really happy with that. Our crimp on the case neck is very subtle. It's just right. It's not holding that bullet in there too tight, but it's also not going to let that bullet, if it gets banged around or the recoil of the rifle, it's not going to move that bullet within the brass. So that's just the way I like it. That's, I guess, a bit of a personal preference, but I like that. So stick that there. Another thing that I really like to do, here's a box that's the exact same thing that's already been loaded, but I like to keep track of what I've got. So these ones have different brass. This is a military Western Cartridge Company brass. Otherwise, it's all the same dimensions, powder charge, everything's the same as what we're loading today. But I'll make a card like this for each loading that I do, and it tells me what bullet I'm using, what brass I'm using, primer, powder, and how much, case overall length. This is an estimate on the velocity of the round based on Alliance information on their website based on Hornady's information for the bullet. It's an estimate of approximately how fast it's going to be going. 2650 is, I'd say average, maybe a little under average for the velocity. But like I said earlier, this has given me pretty good groups. I've been really happy with it. Actually, I think I have one of my targets sitting here. This is at 100 yards, and I mean, that's not great there, but other groups I've done have been tighter than that. But it's been, for plinking ammo, it's great, and it's quite an affordable round to be making. I've gotten the bullets on sale on Midway USA's website, so that always cuts down on cost. So let's clean another one off, and we'll check it. Looks good. Another thing this headspace gauge does is it kind of simulates the chamber of your rifle. So if you find that the brass is stiff going in there, it's going to be stiff going into your rifle, so you know something's a little bit off. But if it goes in there nice, you know it's probably going to chamber really well in your firearm. I will check every one. I like to do that just to make sure, looking for anything that doesn't quite look right. Also having a look at the primers, making sure that they're seated properly in there, not sitting proud. Alright, these all look really good. I think they're going to chamber really well and work very nice. I will make a card similar to that one that'll go in here after the fact, just so I know what I'm shooting. I've been loading quite a bit of different things, so it's always good to know for sure. Sometimes I'll even mark the cases if it looks similar to something else. So I can make sure, like for example, I have this box here, which is almost the exact same round. Dimensions are very, very similar. This bullet on the left has a cantilever, but otherwise it's the same weight, same shape, hollow point boat tail. But if you see on the bottom, I've marked it with a red line because this is a hot round. This one is traveling at around 3,000 feet per second. And you know, if I'm looking for something with a little flatter trajectory, if I'm going really stretching out there, this one's quite accurate. But I want to be sure that I know what I'm shooting. So these ones are marked on the case as well as my card. You know, it tells me I've got a much higher amount of powder in the case, and you know, I'm traveling a lot faster. So it's good, always good to have good organization. Even if everything you load is exactly the same, it's good to just know what you have and keep on top of it. So that's about it for this part of the reloading. I absolutely love the Dillon press. I am new to reloading. I've probably loaded about 300 rounds of .308 so far. I haven't loaded any other caliber I plan to do. 9mm, 45 down the road, 223, and whatever else comes along that seems feasible to load. And saving all my brass so that when it comes time I'm as well set up as I can be. But I've been very happy with the Dillon press. I'd highly recommend it. They are a little bit more expensive than others, but you definitely get what you pay for. Well, here's completed 50 rounds of that exact ammunition that we were making. I already had 30 rounds in this box. I had shot 20 rounds, so I just put them all into this one. But you can see we've got 50 rounds of this nice, pretty accurate target ammo. So we might as well get out and shoot it and see how it does.